Good afternoon and welcome to Town Hall here on WHCP 101.5. I'm Marco Garcia.
And I'm Dave Woodland. Every first Tuesday, Cambridge Mayor Andrew Bradshaw and a rotating pair of Cambridge commissioners join us here to take over Midshore Midday to update the community on issues of concern and to answer your questions, which you can post in chat on the WHCP Facebook or YouTube streams.
Joining Mayor Bradshaw today is Ward 3 Commissioner Jameson Harrington, and we welcome the new interim city manager, David Deutsch. Let's get right to opening remarks. Mayor Bradshaw, welcome back to Town Hall.
Marco, thanks for having me. Really looking forward to answering some of the questions that we have today, and also introducing our interim city manager, Mr. David Deutsch, to the people of Cambridge. We've had an opportunity now to work with David for close to a month, and the changes and the opportunities that we continue to see are great. We're happy to have him here, and we look forward to continuing to make changes within the city organizationally as we move toward the hiring of a permanent city manager in the next 3 to 4 months. I think that today we'll be able to touch on a lot of the things that David has seen and a lot of the things that continue to be ongoing issues for the city of Cambridge, but also things that we see as successes over the short time that he's been here, and things that we've identified as priorities that we're going to be able to work toward addressing over the course of the next few months while David is with us, and then also moving forward as we make a hire on a permanent city manager. I'll hand it over now to Commissioner Jameson Harrington.
All right, thanks again for having me on. I think we've got a lot of exciting things in store here in the future for Cambridge, not just with the interim city manager, but moving forward with a full-time manager. So thank you.
Let's welcome David Deutsch and the new interim city manager to Cambridge and get a sense of his qualifications to serve and what drew him to this position.
So thank you for inviting me. Glad to be with you this afternoon, and thanks for the opportunity. In terms of qualifications, I'm a career city manager and have been in the business a long time, really. Started out in the mid-'70s in the Hartford area in Connecticut, working for a small town there as an assistant, and went on to York County, Pennsylvania, and then in '93 moved to Bowie, Maryland, and as a city manager there in a city that is 4th or 5th largest in our state at this point. So I retired, if you will, in 2016 from full-time service, and my wife and I wanted to do some traveling, and we managed to do some of that. I've also done a number of interim assignments in communities across the state, Westminster, Cheverly in Prince George's County, Sykesville again in Carroll County, Pocomoke City here on the shore. And so I was contacted by a mutual colleague of Mayor Bradshaw's and mine, and kind of put us together in early summer, and we talked about the possibility, and I was intrigued by the challenges that present themselves, and I was finishing up in Westminster, and I said, well, you know, if we can work this out, I can come on board the day after Labor Day, and that is exactly what happened. So I'm glad to be here. It's an interesting assignment, some great folks, and it's nice to be only 60 miles from home compared to 150 when I was in Carroll County.
Well, I can tell you something, Mr. Deutsch. When somebody represents the city in a situation such as yours, there are several things that are important. You need to be prompt, knowledgeable, considerate, and courteous. And many times people look at you as a nuisance, and I know that from personal experience, and that's absolutely unacceptable. I want you to know I emailed you with a situation, and you were right on top of it. You responded immediately, and you were a real help. And I was highly impressed. And you're going to be involved in the situation for the next several months. I'd like to ask you if there's a potential timeline, and hopefully you're a potential applicant for the position. Is that so?
Well, let me dispense with the candidacy question real quickly, and I've answered this kind of flattering question in other places. If I had wanted to stay in full-time service, I'd have stayed in Bowie. Things were going well. I had a great council and a great community. And so, like I said, we wanted to start doing some traveling. The kids were growing, and, it's time to get out and see the world. So, no, I would not be a candidate for the full-time position. In addition to serving as an interim manager in a number of communities that I mentioned, I've also been affiliated with a national firm that does executive search, primarily focused on city and town managers. So we discussed the other night a process for moving forward here in Cambridge with a recruitment for the next city manager. Typically, those searches require about 90 to 120 days to get the signature of the selected candidate on a contract. Generally anywhere from 30 to 60 days after that for the person to arrive, because most folks, if they're working as a manager, have a commitment to notify their governing body before they can exit. That would, assuming we start that kind of process within a month, that would get us sometime in the middle of the first calendar quarter of next year, and potentially could have someone on board, let's say by early March. That's, I think, a realistic target.
And I just want to add to that as well. One of the key considerations when I was put in contact with David and had him reach out and meet Commissioner Harrington and reach out and speak to the commission president by phone was the fact that he has this extensive background as a city manager, but he also is now serving as an executive search director. And so what we wanted to have was a situation where we would have an individual who knew the ins and outs of the city organization while the search was being performed, and knew the challenges and also the benefits that exist within the organization, so that we didn't have a search being performed by an organization, company, individual that was going to be in some way clouded or veiled in terms of the knowledge of the internal organization. David's pretty uniquely qualified in serving as an interim manager and also as the head of a search to ensure that the individual that's being interviewed and ultimately selected is one that has a full understanding of what's going on within the organization. Certainly we don't want to paint a negative picture of the organization, but we also don't want to give any surprises to an individual as they come on board and enter into the organization. We want to ensure that they're fully aware of all the positives, but also any challenges that do exist, so that they're ready to meet those and come to solutions along with the mayor and council.
Thank you, guys. What are your first up priorities to tackle?
So that's it's an interesting question, because there's an old saying: if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. So the first couple of days that I was on board, and I was with the mayor pretty much nonstop, and I was taking notes. A lot of priorities, and some of them are external, some are internal, and we're trying to focus on a number of areas that need to be addressed. We talked the other night with the mayor and the council members about moving forward with addressing what has become an issue, and how to resolve the human resources focus within the organization. So council seems supportive of the direction that was suggested, which is basically to create a position within the organization. I'm collecting some position descriptions from other organizations. We'll craft one for Cambridge, recommend a salary, and hopefully begin a recruitment fairly soon that can provide a better organizational focus for managing that function within the organization, which currently is a bit diffuse and needs better focus. So that's one of the priorities. There's a number of issues that are ongoing that need attention, and I'm spending time with each of the key staff members each week to make sure that I know what they're doing. We've got some experienced people. We also have some folks who've not been with the city as long as others, so we're sharing some concerns there, and there's a number of opportunities for improvement, but I've told all of the elected officials I'm not interested in changing anything for the sake of change. We only want to move forward with making changes that are logical and appropriate and help move us forward, and that's what we're all about.
All right, thank you for sharing that. Will there be a formal HR department with detailed hiring, retention, evaluation, and disciplinary procedures?
So this is an evolving matter. I don't necessarily see it as an HR department. It may be, and we talked about this the other night, a week ago Monday. The title could even be something such as an assistant to the city manager for human resources, or it could be human resources director. That's not all that critical, but there needs to be a stronger focus on human resource management within the organization, and the policies related to hiring, firing, discipline, retention, training, risk management, all seem to fall under that umbrella. It's done well in some parts of the organization right now, and we need improvement in other parts of the organization. But to give it an organizational focus that works and makes sense and is understood internally and externally are the twin goals of this. It's not about adding to headcount and creating additional positions. It's about improving the organization and its outcomes.
Thank you, guys. Will there be a Director of Public Works position again?
So we have an incumbent position filled by someone whose title is Superintendent of Public Works. I think that the best I can tell you at this point regarding Public Works is, like many parts of the organization, we're taking a look at it. How are we best positioned to manage the functions that are typical public works functions? How can we make sure that we can provide street maintenance services and building maintenance services and maintenance of public facilities in the most appropriate and efficient manner with the organization that we have? There's been a few iterations of different organizational structures. We want to take a look and see what works best. I don't have any preconceived outcomes. We're taking a look at various options at this point.
And one of the first things we did when David came in, we looked at what the current organizational structure is, and we also looked at what it had been previously. And David's been reviewing that and looking at that and comparing that to best practices in other communities. And I think ultimately the goal here isn't to have this title or that title filled. The goal is to have the best provision of services from the organization, and if that requires organizational restructuring, that may be the case, and if it does not and it can be performed with the current structuring, then that's fine too, but ultimately it's about providing those services at a level people expect with the additional taxing that they have in living within the city, and also with the expectation that you have living within a municipality in the state of Maryland. So ultimately, if we can do it with what we've got, that's great. If it requires filling a position or restructuring an organizational portion of the city's corporate structure, that's fine too. But I think right now, with David being here for the time he's been, it's really about seeing what we have and taking stock of that and ensuring that what we have can perform to its highest function before we look at making any adjustments to it.
All right, thank you. There's finally a roof on the Hearn building, and the new RAR laboratory is open, with a new distillery coming where the Chesapeake restaurant equipment was for many years. What's going well and what challenges remain?
I think we're in a position right now where there's a lot of success ongoing in the downtown. RAR's success is hugely important. The discussion of a potential distillery in the former Chesapeake equipment location will be pretty transformative for that end of Gay Street and that portion of the downtown as well. Ultimately, that still has to come to fruition. It's in the discussion phase at this point, and we really hope to see it happen. But nothing's certain until it's done. But I do think that we remain in a position where our city is fairly self-supporting. And what I mean by that is, generally when you go to restaurants and bars in downtown Cambridge, you see a lot of locals. And certainly we want to supplement that with tourism dollars as well. So one area where we need to continue to see growth is within our efforts for marketing and tourism and drawing outside monies into the community. And look, part of that's working with the Hyatt, and Joel Bundy, the GM over at the Hyatt's excellent about working with the community and trying to get his guests out in supporting the community. But we also have to work with other organizations, with the state and with the county to continue to improve our marketing efforts. And I think, too, we've got to work with the assets we have, but we also have to be looking to the assets that we're going to have in the future, and we have to ensure that those are going to be supplemental to what we're doing and continue to contribute and grow the effort. We continue to see, I think, outside the downtown, also investment into the Pine Street community. If you take a ride down Pine Street right now, there's a couple of homes that are being renovated, a couple more that are being built, and that may be the first time in a long time that we've seen that kind of residential improvement or investment into Pine Street proper. It's been a long time coming, but it's a huge focus because it's a historic part of our city. It's our historic African American center, and it's also an area that is very much in the heart of our city and in an area where we want to be drawing visitors and ensure that they have an exposure to that history as well. This past weekend, for example, we had the House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer in town, along with a few other congressional leaders, and they were here to see where Gloria Richardson had walked and led the Cambridge movement. They were here to learn more about Harriet Tubman. They were here to learn more about Cambridge's place in the civil rights movement and in bringing equality before the law for all citizens of the United States. And so we've got to have an opportunity, and we've got to ensure that our opportunity to put our best foot forward when we have these folks here exists. So that's an area, of course, where we want to continue to see improvement, but I think we've seen a lot of wonderful things happening, and I think Commissioner Harrington can speak on that as well, especially with the downtown falling within Ward 3.
Yeah, speaking of using our existing assets, I've been sitting in with Main Street, and they've been conducting interviews for an executive director position. I have to say some of the candidates were fantastic, and a few of the things that stood out were their ability to combine not just Main Street but the Pine Street area too, and make it feel like one cohesive downtown. So I'm hoping moving forward we'll have someone in that position soon, and have some of our events that bring tourists and help our local businesses.
Thank you, guys. The new medical center opening has been postponed due to HVAC issues, but we understand the new Delmarva Community Services Multi-Generational Center is open. Updates to either project?
I could speak to the medical center. They did postpone because of an HVAC issue that was discovered during a walkthrough prior to a ribbon cutting. So we don't have an exact date from them. they need to solve that HVAC problem, and I'm sure it's rather involved given the type of equipment that is in that facility. So we are in frequent communication with the folks in the medical center, and we all look forward to that wonderful facility opening to serve the community. I'm going to defer to the mayor on the other part of the question.
The intergenerational center will be opening shortly. There's a ribbon cutting that's going to be occurring in early November, and the lieutenant governor is going to be there for that ribbon cutting. Both of these are transformative projects for the city, of course, particularly the medical center. One thing that's been discussed is though Dorchester General has served this community very well for a very long time, the facility is so far past its reasonable use that getting into the new freestanding medical center is going to be hugely important for this community. And there will be growing pains, of course, and I've heard a few concerns that have been expressed by folks in EMS, but I think that these growing pains will be worked out quickly and will ensure that the facility has a better ability to meet the needs of the community than what we currently have operating. So I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward as well to the Intergenerational Center opening and welcoming the Lieutenant Governor back to Cambridge.
All right, thank you. Let's talk about staffing that has been an issue in the police department and the city enforcement unit. Is there an update on hiring and retention efforts, including any increase in the pay to keep from losing good officers?
With Cambridge Police, we've really been addressing this, I think, very well so far. Since we've come into office, and especially over the course of the last 4 months or so, I think we've really put a big focus on policing in the city of Cambridge because we have seen continued violent crime, and that does, provide a reputation for the city that we don't want to have. So over the course of the last few months, we have sworn in and now have operating on the street 2 new certified officers. We have within the police academy at Warwick Community College 4 additional officers who, should they complete their training satisfactorily, will come onto the force in December. And then with the upcoming class of cadets, we have 5 individuals that are being engaged by the Cambridge Police Department right now, and that class doesn't go into training until January 15th, I believe. So there's still an opportune time for those who are interested in becoming involved in policing to go ahead and become part of that class as well. And we've seen a decrease in officers leaving. We still have a few that have decided to move on, but one of the big priorities was providing pay raises within the last budget cycle, and we did so. And so now we are on par with some of our peer agencies here on the Eastern Shore. Our starting salary for a new officer is above that in Easton, for example, or Talbot County. And so we do have an opportunity now where we're very competitive, and we provide a full policing experience for an officer. They're not simply doing traffic control. They are being a police. They are not simply being a traffic officer or anything of that nature. And that is appealing to folks that are getting into policing as well.
Thank you, guys. COVID numbers are still not looking good for the area. What efforts are being made to improve rates for vaccination and spread?
I can speak to that from the city government perspective. We continue to encourage all of our staff members who have not been vaccinated to do so. The vast majority have been vaccinated. Folks are wearing masks routinely within city facilities. City Hall remains closed to visitors. We will have a few meetings that have been prearranged and make sure that people wear masks, but we're trying to protect our employees, try to limit the spread of any Delta variant within our organization. So we want to make sure that we provide a healthy and safe environment for staff and community members who come in contact with them. So it continues to be a focus. Internally, a broader issue in the larger community certainly is within the school system that affects a range of ages, particularly those who are too young to be able to get vaccinated at the current time.
In addition to what David said, I've been in contact as well with the Dorchester County Health Department, and actually will be speaking with them this afternoon, giving a call back to discuss some of the efforts we can make out in the community. And one of the other things that we're doing is when people are coming in and making event requests to use city facilities or city locations, city parks for an event, one of the things that they have to do is provide a COVID mitigation plan with the documentation that shows just what they are anticipating doing to ensure that there's not a spread event that occurs at their particular requested event.
And I know the mayor touched on this, but I do want to thank the Dorchester County Health Department, because they do a lot of vaccine clinics and outreach, and it has been noticed. So a big thank you to them.
All right. Has there been any interest in development on the waterfront by somebody who might be interested in working with you on that?
We've had fairly significant interest, I think, actually. Without going into too many details, there's a developer that is located with headquarters in Maryland that has expressed interest and came here in December to see the property, came back in January to see the property, has met with CWDI, I think, on 2 occasions, possibly 3 occasions, and that's also been in further contact with me to discuss the city's side of things. There's another developer who's very well known on the Midshore that's done a lot of great things in the region that has expressed interest. There's a third developer that has expressed some menial interest that reached out to my office, and then there's a fourth developer who's done things, is located again in Maryland, but has done things all along the East Coast that has expressed interest. But ultimately, the thing that's difficult for all developers is right now, CWDI does not have title to the full property. They're in process of getting title to the portion of the property that was controlled by the city, but they don't have the hospital property yet. So that makes it difficult to negotiate with a potential developer. And I think too, there's a desire on the part of developers to have a better understanding of expectations and what the relationship's going to be with CWDI, the city, the Department of Housing and Community Development, and the county. So one of the things that we've got to work through, and that I know the state's working very hard with CWDI on, is better messaging what that relationship's going to be and how that's going to work out. To my understanding, I think there was a meeting between the state and CWDI a couple of weeks ago to discuss some of these issues, and I'm certain it was a fruitful discussion. So there's absolutely a fairly significant amount of developer interest. As a matter of fact, it's just a matter of getting from interest to a request for proposals being put out to engaging a developer who's going to meet the needs that are within that request for proposals, and that can provide a proposal that not only meets those needs but also pencils out so the development can work out for the developer as well. I know David's been a little bit involved since he took over as interim manager, because the manager position does have a seat on the CWDI board as well.
Oh, thank you, guys. Is it true that the University of Maryland medical system is now expecting significant payment to turn over the property? Won't there be substantial cost involved in the teardown?
So let me address that in reverse order of the questions. Yes, there will be substantial costs, but the who pays for what and what monies are involved with the University of Maryland medical system and CWDI and the state of Maryland are all part of ongoing discussions. So it has not been resolved yet, but folks are coming to the table, and I think the issues are being narrowed as we move forward, as the new building is about to open. So we have to make sure that when any impediments arise, that the city can assist in removing, that we do that, and that's part of our goal is to really make sure that the waterfront development entire project is as free of what I might call bureaucratic barriers as possible. And, you know, we're all engaged in this process. There's some great potential opportunities for the city, for the county, and for the region with that tremendous asset there.
And with regard to the specific question regarding teardown, the state's been very open and very clear, particularly out of DHCD, that they will be providing a significant portion of that demolition funding, and has budgeted last year for fiscal 20 and fiscal 21 to contribute to that, and they've messaged that in a fairly regular fashion when they've been here and discussed the project. Will it be the entire cost of demolition? I hesitate to say because I don't know what demolition will cost, but I do know that the state of Maryland does anticipate playing a role in ensuring that demolition is funded, and it's done to a level that addresses any environmental or health-related impacts that may exist on the site as well, because it was a medical facility that was built. A rebuild of a facility from the turn of the 20th century, but then a facility that existed in its current iteration since the mid-century of the 20th century. So a lot of things have changed since then: lead paint, use of mercury, other chemicals, and so the state fully understands what will be necessary with the demolition and is a partner in that portion of the project.
This is Dorchester Goes Purple kickoff month. Hasn't substance abuse gotten worse during the pandemic? What efforts are being made to deal with the continuing opioid and fentanyl crisis?
So I think there's a national issue that substance abuse has gotten worse nationally during the pandemic. On a local level, within the city organization, the chief of police is involved with various organizations and collaborating with area law enforcement to provide as much of a focus as possible from law enforcement perspective, as well as partnering with social service agencies. So, a fair amount of that is beyond city scope, but we work with partner agencies all the time.
And we are also, I don't know if blessed is the right word, but we do have an asset here as well in Avenues Recovery Center, which opened back in December of 2020. And though they do draw folks from throughout the state who are looking to overcome addiction issues, they do provide a fairly significant focus locally, and that's an availability that has not existed previously in this community, or not to the level or the level of quality or professionalism that exists now with that asset. So slowly but surely trying to address these things. And look, one of the big things too is education, right? So one of the areas that I've had some discussions recently is with Chesapeake College about providing ongoing adult education for workforce development, because one of the things that drives people both into addiction but also into the criminal element of drug distribution is a lack of economic opportunity. So one of the things we have to do, we've got to take a holistic approach to it, and part of that's law enforcement, part of that's education, part of that's ongoing opportunity, and part of that's an escape from the cycle of addiction as well. And I think we're slowly addressing all of those as much as we can.
Thank you, guys. Did the city spend all of the COVID relief funds? And if so, how much was spent on what?
Well, as far as I know, none of it's been spent. We did, so for some background and some explanation, the funds that are being distributed are distributed by the state, but they're federal funds. They come via the Maryland Department of Budget and Management, and are dispersed to the municipalities. Now, they're dispersed in two equal disbursements, one in calendar 2021 and one in calendar 2022. So half the money we won't see for another 9 months. With that being said, at this point, outside of approval to buy a fire truck that we expect will be funded via those funds. We've spent nothing of this money yet, and we've got plenty of time to do so. We have until December of 2024 to make decisions, and then December of 2026 to actually make use of the funds. So going a little bit slow and ensuring that we're doing what is best for a one-time availability like this is much smarter than jumping in whole hog and deciding all at once to spend what is going to ultimately be $12.1 million on some vanity projects. Now, that being said, we want to ensure that we spend these funds in areas where we may not have an opportunity for other funding. And so one of the things that David and I have discussed is becoming more proactive with regard to our grant funding and other funding opportunity research, so that we can ensure that we don't use these funds on things that could have been funded through another method.
Is the city buying some electric police cars? If so, was a grant involved? And is this substantially different price-wise than the regular gasoline motors?
So the city in the last budget cycle made approval to purchase a single electric vehicle, and this was a priority that was set forth by Commissioner Roach, Ward 1. Brian was specific that he thought that we needed to start looking at green energy alternatives for things, and one area to do so would be through use of an electric vehicle in the police department. It's an experiment of sorts. We'll see how it goes, but within the budget process, Commissioner Roach really made it a priority to try to explore things like that for the city, so that we could be at the leading edge rather than caught flat-footed as these things become more common within the realm that we're working in.
There may be other opportunities to implement electric vehicles. For example, in code enforcement, 98% of the travel by city staff in code enforcement is local. So we wouldn't have to worry about the distance between electric vehicle chargers. That's a broader national issue. But as long as we have a charging station locally, we should be able to keep that vehicle charged and ready to run. So, I see us examining the prospect of making our fleet more environmentally sound, and less reliant on gasoline engines, and it's really a transition that we need to start, and there is some opportunities that we will be looking at as we go forward.
And just to echo that, specifically now, I think with what we're doing with the police department, it's going to be very, very focused in a few areas within the department: community policing, potentially criminal investigation division, but broadly across the city organizationally. As David pointed out, code enforcement's a place where it makes a lot of sense. Some of the other staff vehicles that exist within the organization makes a lot of sense. And, we may see a time sooner than later where some of the other light duty equipment would make sense as well. I don't know that we're totally there on things like trucks and things of that nature yet, but, in 5 years, I think the technology may be to that point.
Nice. Thank you, guys. What happened at last night's work session?
So I can attempt to respond to that. The first item on the agenda was a change proposed to what we call administrative standard operating procedures, with the wonderful acronym of ASOP. So we had an outdated ASOP, and we recommended a week earlier that council consider a feature that is often found in municipal procurement regulations that would allow for the negotiation for professional services, whether that's architecture, planning, legal services, audit, indeed executive search. to expedite those processes and not to avoid competitive aspects, but to expedite and to get the best price at the same time. So council recognized the benefit in doing that and passed the proposal with a slight modification to ensure appropriate reporting from the city manager to the mayor and then to the full council, which is a totally appropriate addition to the document that was before them. And so that will facilitate, for example, in the current matter, that will facilitate the council contracting for executive search without a protracted request for a proposal process, since it is clearly everyone's desire to move forward as quickly as possible with searching for the next city manager. And the other item was a sort of a process question. As part of that, the charter requires a search committee, which is an interesting element of the charter. We have to kind of figure out how to work with the search committee, but before we get to that point, the council is going to be discussing nominees, and apparently will select folks for that committee of volunteers at their next meeting on the 25th of this month.
With regard to the search committee, David brings up a point that I like. I like how he termed it. It's interesting. If one reviews other charters, you tend not to see the search committee within the charter per se. It's typically a process. Either one is established or something else is performed, or a executive search firm is engaged. In our case, our search committee requirement is particularly odd in that it requires one to either be a resident of the city, which makes sense, or a resident of the county, but not the city, which makes less sense, but the city is the county seat and is the economic center of the county. So there's some understanding that makes a bit of sense. Or owns a business that operates or is headquartered in the city, which again makes someone very, I think, engaged in city business and aware of what's ongoing within the city. Or it requires an individual to be an owner of a second home, either in the city or in the county. And that one's where it gets a bit odd, particularly because you could have someone that owns a vacation home and is in Dorchester County and is not in Cambridge per se, but is in, let's say they're north of Hurlock 2 weeks a year. And yet because they own this secondary home in the county, could be named to the committee. So one thing I did impress upon the council was that you do have a fair amount of latitude with your selections, but please, if at all possible, ensure that these are individuals that are very engaged in the success of the city and isn't just somebody that meets the bare requirement, but that is truly going to care about what the outcomes are for the city long term.
Is it true there will be a Marina Committee appointed by the council to monitor and support Oasis contract, the completion of the wave action study, failing EFH docks, and conversion of big slips to smaller ones?
There is a proposal that has been submitted by a few citizens that a Marina Committee be established. It's not really been looked at by council yet. It's not been vetted by council, and what those responsibilities would be have not been really discussed by council at this point. There may well be a Marina Committee, but we're not at a point right now where we're going to say conclusively, absolutely there is, or absolutely not, there won't be. I think it's something that needs to be weighed against need versus simple outreach, and it needs to be something that's weighed against what the requirements are within the current contract with Oasis, and also weighed against what our relationship is with DNR, because they're so involved with marina matters as well.
Thank you, guys. Shoreline efforts are underway with seawall protections at the end of Oakley Street and others slated next. Won't the water supply spill onto low-lying areas?
So that's an interesting question. I was discussing this earlier this morning with Pat Escher, our Director of Planning. There's a number of different aspects of this that are already being examined. There was a recent meeting addressing this. Over 50 residents participated. There obviously is strong community interest. We're working with various stakeholders and potential grant funding sources to look at what might be the best way to address this. It's not just at the end of Oakley Street. It's all along the shoreline. So this is an emerging issue that is here, and we need to confront it. And I think it's important to recognize that the Cambridge community is already engaged in the effort of focusing on resiliency. A few years ago, it was not a term that we heard much in local government, and became a bit of a new buzzword, but we recognize the importance of the issue. We see the effects of climate change throughout the country, and we can see it right here in our own community. So it's going to be an ongoing issue. Staff is working with various folks as well as our elected officials to continue to focus on the matter.
And to add to that, if this is something you're interested in, you can check out the Cambridge Shoreline Resilience Plan. It's available at makecambridgeresilient.org.
Oh, thank you, guys. The ADA committee has reportedly not met in over a year. Has it been disbanded?
I'm not sure where that report comes from. They just met, I think, on September. Let me see here on the calendar really quickly. September 22nd, I believe, they met, and I know they've met on at least 3 occasions over the course of the last 4.5 months, 5 months. And in fact, I know that they also worked with the Salisbury University GIS students that were in the city that were doing the housing report renewal, if we want to call it that. They also worked with ADA committee on sidewalk study as well, and upgrading and bringing that up to a more present reflection of the reality. So no, ADA committee has not been dissolved. As a matter of fact, they're meeting regularly, still chaired by Mr. Jerry Burrows, who has been the chair for some period of time. Scott Shores is there, Hervé Heyman's there, other individuals that have been on the committee remain on the committee and are meeting regularly.
Yeah, I can second that comment. It's another item that I was actually discussing with Ms. Escher, our planning director, earlier this morning. So I don't know where these notions of not having met for a year come from, and the mayor's comment about the Salisbury University team having the opportunity to provide some focus beyond the housing issue onto ADA was helpful and continues to provide additional data that will help inform some of the public works issues that we need to contain in future budgets.
All right, thank you. Trash collection issues were seemingly improving in recent months, but new complaints have surfaced of late on social media. Any word on that topic?
That's one that David and Jameson and I have all been in a great deal of communication about. Commissioner Harrington and I have really been working on this and discussing potential opportunities. Really, I guess going back to probably April or May, right?
Yeah.
And then with David coming on, he talked about the whirlwind tour that I gave him in his first 2 days, and one of the big areas of focus was the ongoing issues with trash collection. And what we know is this: with the current contractor, what we've seen will be a period of a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks where the issues dispel themselves and then they return. And what you find as well is that when you talk to people that live outside the city, during those periods where the city issues seem to be addressed, it appears as though the service received in the unincorporated areas falls off. So I think it's a shuffling of manpower as much as anything. But one thing that we've discussed is engaging with a firm to perform a study to see just what the best path forward is with this. We've had discussions with some other contractors that I don't think are going to be viable based on the numbers that have been submitted, and then we also have discussions to be had about internal trash collection, which if you talk to people, there is a broad matter of opinion that folks think that the service was more reliable when managed by the city, if not as potentially sophisticated as it could be moving forward. And I'll hand over to both David and Jameson on that, because I know it's a matter that's been of great importance to both of them as well.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I remember when we switched over to the contractor service, it was like a night and day difference. Personally, I'd love to see it come back in-house, and as the mayor discussed, we've been looking into it. It's just going to all come down to costs and what's going to work best for us.
So there's multiple aspects to it, as the mayor and Commissioner Harrington have alluded to. In the meantime, while we are looking at various options, we are working hard at holding the contractor's feet to the fire. Yes, we've had recent complaints that are at a higher level than we had X number of months ago. But I've had several conversations with our superintendent of public works stressing that we need to be as strong as possible in our communication with the contractor and not accept excuses that might be provided. It's a small operation that doesn't seem as effectively organized to handle our contract as they might be. But they are who we have right now. And so as long as they are working in Cambridge under contract, we have to make sure that they produce and provide the service that is acceptable to the community. And, the contract calls for a reasonable level of service. It doesn't call for anything that's unattainable. So we've got a number of issues that we are continuing to focus on, whether we stay with a contract or whether we bring it in-house. And if we bring it in-house, what are the cost implications both for operating and for capital?
Thank you, guys. What are the spending plans for street repairs and resurfacing? And are there any new sidewalks planned for the many streets that have none?
It's my understanding, having spoken to the prior city manager, that one of the issues that they faced was budgetary limitations with regard to ongoing resurfacing. So as we move forward, we see two things happening. We see more investment in our existing communities, which contribute to a growing tax base, and then we also see new investment on the fringes of the city, which contribute to additional tax base as well. And one of the things that we've suffered with as a community is what had been for a long time a shrinking tax base that limited some of the services that were provided. One of those being street resurfacing. They were deferred because there were other more immediate needs that were in place, whether that be hiring police or replacing sewer lines or whatever it may be. So moving forward, that is an area that I think is something that citizens see. And being so apparent to citizens, it's an area that if or when we get back to resurfacing, it will be an indication to citizens that the city is financially in a much better and stronger position than it had previously been in. And one of the things that we want to do that is a personal priority of mine is when we do the resurfacing in some of these neighborhoods where, as it's indicated, there aren't sidewalks, that we perform some of the infrastructure improvement and installation that has not occurred in the past. And Cambridge is a place where, unfortunately, you see a lot of that lack of pedestrian infrastructure. infrastructure and what had historically been African American communities in Ward 2 and in Ward 3. And you see it in a few other places, but you see it specifically in areas like that, areas like Robin Street, areas like the extension of High Street, areas like Phillips Street and Moores Avenue. And you see homes that dump directly into the street. So in these areas, particularly where there are people that are economically disadvantaged, being able to use pedestrian infrastructure is hugely important. So that's got to be a focus of ours as we make those improvements moving forward. And part of that's going to be, again, as I mentioned earlier, finding additional funding sources and doing it in-house when we can, but certainly taking advantage of programs or funding sources that exist that we've not previously taken advantage of in the past, because we'll have a more sophisticated organization that can engage those funding sources.
All right, one final question. You've been in office coming up on a year. How would you grade yourself on your performance?
I'll let Commissioner Harrington take that first because I don't grade myself on a curve.
Let's see. There's a lot I wish I could have gotten done. I mean, we're all new to this, which is, kind of a blessing and a curse. We're all making the same mistakes together, but we're all making the same successes together. I want to say the next 3 years are definitely going to be an improvement in performance. This year, maybe give myself a 6, 7.
I like a number grading system like that. It gets me out of having to do a letter grade.
A 6 or a 7 out of what? 6 or a 7?
Let's go with the standard 10.
You know what? I'm not going to grade myself. I'm going to grade the body. I have heard some in the community talk about some fractures in terms of relationships and things on the council. And look, on individual issues, I think that is the case. People aren't going to agree on everything, right? But I think this group is a group that is much more willing to have discussion and disagree, for the most part agreeably, than what we've seen in the past in Cambridge. And that in itself is deserving of a higher grade. But I think it speaks to the fact that everyone's very serious about what they're doing, and they care a great deal about what they've taken on. I know that the time commitment I've seen from Commissioner Harrington, leaving work to have meetings with citizens. Same with the commission president, LeJan Cephas, her effort to get out there and meet with folks. The passion that's been shown by Commissioners Roach and Malkus on issues of sustainability and downtown growth and economic development. I mean, you can't speak more highly about that. And then likewise with Commissioner Cephas on matters of public safety and on matters that are of great importance in terms of diversity within the city. So everyone's got kind of their own ballywick and focus, but everyone I think has done a particularly good job of putting an emphasis on performing at an above part-time level on what is supposed to be a part-time position. And so I would hesitate to put a letter grade or a number grade to it, but I would just say that what we've seen from all the elected officials goes well beyond, I think, what would be reasonably expected in a lot of communities. But it's because they care and they love this city and they want to see this place succeed and overcome some of the issues that have existed here for decades and in some cases going on a century.
Let me make a quick comment, if I might. It's extremely rare to have an entirely new governing body. I'm not sure there's too many communities in Maryland or elsewhere that have gone through such a significant change. And the folks in Cambridge have done well in adapting to the challenges that they have confronted in their first year. To the extent that I can provide some guidance during my limited time, that's also part of my role. And I've reiterated that several times. I'm only in town a limited time period each week, 2 days in town, 1 day working remotely. But I've tried to tell folks, and I say it often, don't hesitate to call me, email me, text me, regardless of whether it's a current issue in front of the council or whether it's something you just want to get a reaction to from an old hand. That's how I can provide some additional assistance.
Well, that's to be applauded, and I'm only one person, but I appreciate that. Our time is gone today. We'd like to thank the mayor and the commissioners Harrington and city manager David Deutsch for being accessible to the community via town hall each month. Thanks for listening.
And a reminder that next month, Town Hall will be November 2nd, the first Tuesday at noon, to accommodate scheduling demands of our elected officials. This program will be broadcast this Sunday at 1 p.m. and will be permanently archived at the WHCP Facebook and YouTube sites. Thanks to Technical Director Julian Jackson, and on behalf of co-host Dave Wheatman, I'm Marco Garcia. Make it a great day.